Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Housing Subcommittee to order, please. Roll call, please, Mr. Clerk. Here.
Council Chow. Council Getchia.
Here.
Two present.
Thank you. I want to welcome everyone who is in the chamber and people who is watching at home. This is the Housing Subcommittee meeting, and we continue the meeting today to finish up the establishment of the Affordable Housing Trust. And with us, we have CFO Connor Baldwin. And I would turn to Mr. Baldwin to introduce the rest of the team. Also recognize Councilor Mercier in the chamber as well. Just walk in, City Manager Tom Golden. Welcome, Mr. Manager. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And joining me this evening, to my right, Mr. Austin Ball, the Deputy CFO for the city, Giovanni Baez-Rose, Assistant City Manager and Director of DPD, and her Deputy Director, Camilo Espita. Obviously, the City Manager is here as well. And we're very happy to provide an update to the subcommittee on some of the progress towards establishing the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then the second item on the agenda is an update relative to a matter that was referred to this subcommittee, the Lowell Forward Homes and Housing Production Plan. So beginning with the presentation, just a recap for the subcommittee and for anyone who may be watching from home. The subcommittee has met a few times on this matter of establishing an Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is a statutory framework established by the Massachusetts General Laws that affords communities the ability to set up a fund and dedicate certain revenues to a trust that can be used for applications, funding applications for affordable housing developments within the municipality. It can be used for other types of housing assistance. And where the city of Lowell sees this as an opportunity is in attaining some of our affordable housing goals. So on the slide and on the screen, there's some information from the Lowell Forward Master Plan. The Planning and Development Department has done a lot of work over the last couple of years in developing the Lowell Forward Plan. Housing was a major component of it. We see the establishment of the trust as means to an end in achieving some of those housing goals. One of the goals, as stated in the plan, was to produce 800 new affordable housing units by the year 2040. So at some of our prior meetings, we've discussed the framework of the trust. This evening on the regular city council agenda, there is a public hearing and a vote for two items. The first is to adopt Section 55C of Chapter 44 of the general laws, which will, in essence, establish the framework for the trust, and then two, to adopt an ordinance that outlines some of the specifics related to the trust, namely the number of members, the purpose of the trust, et cetera. And then what will happen, if the council approves the ordinance this evening, the next step will be for the city manager to propose members, trustees of the trust that will, part of a component of the ordinance will be that those are required to be confirmed by the city council. There are certain ex officio members, the city manager, the mayor, the executive director of the Lowell Housing Authority, or his or her designee, and then at least two additional members. And there is a requirement to have someone on the board of trustees at all times with lending experience. So there's a minimum of 5 trustees and a maximum of 9. And those would be appointments that are recommended by the city manager and adopted by the city council. So the second thing that we've talked about, just to recap in prior subcommittee meetings, is this idea of a linkage fee ordinance. So the city manager, the administration have been, that was sort of taken back and fine-tuned, and the manager's been meeting, and I'll let him chime in on some of the logistics with some of the development community. So the plan at this time was to pull that back, and to not include that as part of the proposal at this time, and to focus on other revenue streams, namely the ARPA funds. And so part of the driving force for why this is before the council now is that part of the ARPA plan is to use a portion of ARPA to seed the Affordable Housing Trust. And in order to do that, and in order to meet the obligation deadline of 12/31/2024, we must establish the fund first. And so that we're on target for that timeline now, in order to make a transfer from ARPA into the trust before 12/31/2024. And then the Board of Trustees would have until 2026 to expend those funds. There are other potential sources of revenue outside of any potential linkage fee that could act as a sustainable funding source, namely the Community Preservation Act. So 10% of the Community Preservation Act is already designated for affordable housing. And what can happen as a matter of logistics is that the Community Preservation Committee can take that 10% and can designate that or appropriate that into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The Affordable Housing Trust can also accept donations, gifts or grants, as well as to accept donations of real property. And so one thing that other communities have done, and this is in the research that the administration has conducted, is that some communities take their tax title properties and transfer ownership into the trust. That's something that is not a proposal at the moment, but something that we're continuing to investigate. So just to recap, there's some data here that we've talked about at the last housing subcommittee relative to Lowell's housing figures. Since 2019, the city has funded or created 207 units of affordable housing. 16,825 households are cost burdened, with 8,023 of those paying more than half of their income on housing. So that's to sort of underscore the need. And so our next steps as it relates to the Affordable Housing Trust, and I kind of touched on some of these in my opening remarks, would be for this evening, there's a vote before the council to adopt Chapter 44, Section 55C, which is the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Law, and then to consider and adopt the ordinance, the establishment of the Affordable Housing Trust, And then next to establish a board of trustees, which would be the next step to come before the council in the coming weeks. And so that's the gist of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund component. I'm happy to answer any questions that the subcommittee may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin, CFO. It is critical that we are moving forward in establishing this Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as you indicated. One of the funding sources of this is the ARPA, and you touch upon, and I want the people at home who are watching that we need to establish this, and hopefully the council as a whole will vote it to adopt this tonight. That's my hope, so that we can then set it up, the ARPA fund. I would turn to my colleagues if you have any question. Otherwise, we turn to Mr. Manager if you would like to add on. Councillor Mercier.
Thank you. I don't know if this is related to this specific case right here, but this is what I'm concerned about. I try to keep a list of all the housing that is being built. Like, for example, on Summer Street, CTI built 19 units of housing. That used to be a veterans home, but there's 19 units of housing. Do you happen to have a list, not right this moment, but could you compile a list? Because I keep it here and there and there and there. I'd like it in one paper of how many units are recently built in the city. There's housing different places, and I'd just like to keep a track of it. I think that's pretty interesting, but I'm not well organized, so I don't know where everything that I put, and I think you might have it under one paper that I could have that. That'd be interesting to me. Maybe other people would find it interesting too. Thank you. It doesn't have to be by the city of Lowell, like CTI has something, and you know what I mean? That'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a great question. So, Mr. Baldwin, would you like to
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a great idea, and it's something that the DPD certainly has on file. We'd be happy to put together a report and put that on a city council agenda for the public to see, but also certainly for the members of the subcommittee and for the council to have for reference purposes moving forward, and something we can update as new units come online.
Beautiful. Thank
We'd
you.
be happy to do that for you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Mr. Manager, you would like to,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. But just to reiterate, after speaking with the council at that last meeting, the linkage fee right now will not be added, but I've had the opportunity to talk to, as Mr. Baldwin had stated, the CPA chair. They're interested in having a discussion, and we'll probably get to that discussion after Thanksgiving. Spoke to a number of developers by Zoom, on phone calls and whatnot, and there was a concern about the CPA putting any type of additional linkage fee on there at this time. But nobody had said no. They just want to work through it and have more of a discussion point. So I thought that was interesting. And just exploring the different funding options, whether it be with additional ARPA monies, which we're still working through by the end of this calendar year. I've talked to obviously most of the council about this and their thoughts on how to get this to move forward. I was just speaking with Councilor Noon. I did mention that I would mention him tonight. Unfortunately, he is under the weather and will not be with us tonight. But yet, still made the opportunity to call and weigh in on this plan about trying to move forward with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the linkage fee being a concern. So there's been, once again, some face-to-face meetings, some discussions, some Zoom calls, and at this time we are still looking at future discussions to all the aspects that Mr. Baldwin had stated, whether it be I think that one of the good opportunities definitely would be with ARPA, CPA funds, et cetera. There are a lot of good opportunities. We have, once again, I was cautioned with this, with the irons that are next to the fire and things that are happening. I know that the DPD, our team, has been working very closely with developers who are interested in itching.
Yeah.
So there is a lot happening on the housing front.
One of them sit behind you, Mr. Manager, who concerned about the linkage fee. So, Fred Faust, if you would like to say something on that, or
For those of you who know me, you're going to be shocked at how briefly I'm going to speak. I just want to reiterate what the manager has said. There's been a good dialogue going on. There's a lot of ways to do this. When you put the cake in the oven, you want to know how many eggs and how much flour go in so it comes out as a whole cake. And I think we're on the way to doing that. And I can't say that I represent the entire development community, but there were some concerns about this. And I think you're going 100% in the right direction. So thank you for listening.
thank you, Mr. Faust. So, Councillor Kitchie.
Thank you. I have the same concerns about the linkage fee also, and I guess a couple of questions. So once this is approved, what happens with the linkage fee if someone wants to bring it in at any time? Does it have to come back to the council for approval, or would it go to the committee made up of 5 to 9 trustees, or how would that be dealt with? Would it have to come back to the council?
Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's a very good question. So the linkage fee would be established by ordinance, and so it would follow the standard council rules for an ordinance. It would not be a matter that would be created or considered by the Affordable Housing Trust or the Board of Trustees. So the ordinance would have to come before the council for a first reading. It would have to be referred to a public hearing. The public would have an opportunity to come and weigh in favor or in opposition, the same way that other ordinances do. But it would require the standard ordinance process to come back. And again, just to be clear, that is not something the administration is proposing here tonight.
So I was contacted by, and then the Lowell plan, and they wanted me to read some remarks on behalf of the Lowell plan, which Allison Lammy, Executive Director, asked me to read some remarks, and basically you've already addressed them, but I do think we should read this into the record so that it is there. So it says, we appreciate the city's thoughtful and balanced approach to economic development, as reflected in initiatives like the Lowell Forward Master Plan, Housing Production Plan, MBTA Community Zoning Reform, and the proposed Affordable Housing Trust Fund. These actions underscore Lowell's commitment to exclusive and sustainable growth. As outlined in previous communications, however, we remain concerned about the potential unintended consequences of the linkage fee ordinance, including challenges to housing and commercial development, financial impact on municipal revenue, and the need for a comprehensive impact study before moving forward. To that end, we hope you will consider pausing on a decision regarding the adoption of the linkage fee until further studies can be done. We value the opportunity to collaborate with the city in finding effective solutions to advance housing production and economic growth. Thank you again for taking a measured approach on this issue. Best wishes and happy holiday seasons. So I'll give this to the clerk so it's in the record, and I think you guys already addressed that piece, so Mr. Baldwin.
Yeah, Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you. And for the record as well, I did communicate with Ms. Lammy to let her know in an email this morning the update to clarify that, about the linkage fee, that was not part of the proposal. So we did communicate with Ms. Lammy and the Lowell plan regarding the update to the plan.
Not to put you in a box, just a question. What qualifications would put somebody in a position of being a person on this trust or board? Would it be Mr. Faust? Could it be Ms. Lammy? Is that I don't know what qualifications would put people in these positions.
The first 5 that we spoke about, and then also you would need people who are responsible in the working within the financial division, as well as somebody who has building experience. Those are the 2 major, and then I think I'm missing one.
If I may just add, what we've learned in our discussions with other communities that have, and I guess it bears noting here, everyone we spoke with in other communities had nothing but positive remarks regarding the impact of the trust on the community and what that's meant and how important of a funding source that has been. But they have also found it helpful to have legal experience on the trust, so maybe having an attorney, because in addition to some of the work that the Board of Trustees will do, they'll also need to set up and record with the registry trust documents. So there's some legal work that is needed, but people who are familiar with development, it's important to have their input as members of the Board of Trustees, in addition to all of the sort of individuals or skill sets of individuals like the people that the city manager mentioned would be people we'd be looking for as, it's very difficult to find, as the subcommittee knows, the council knows, it's very difficult to find people to serve on boards and commissions. We have a lot of talented professionals in the city of Lowell. I believe it's a requirement that you're a resident. I don't recall offhand. Some of our ordinances include a provision if we're unable to find a resident. I think the Community Preservation Committee is one of those, that there is an ability to take somebody from outside of Lowell if they work in Lowell, et cetera. So we may need to make tweaks to the ordinance after the fact, and it can be amended, but there are a lot of great people living in Lowell that I think could lend some very critical expertise to this board. And those, bankers, lawyers, those types of professionals are those that we would be looking to join.
One more question. What portion of the ARPA are we looking at putting in this fund? I think it's a great opportunity to put money towards the development piece and actually use these funds in future years rather than just hold it in the current breakdown of December 31st. I think it's a great move to take some of those funds and push them that way for future development. Do we have a rough number that we're trying to put in there? And because as we see, like you outlined, you highlighted in here, you're already putting money into a lot of projects, and there's really, okay, here we go this day, we're mix and matching rather than have it an actual funding source put together. Do we have a, Mr. Manager?
Mr. Manager?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, through you to the council. I'm hoping it's a $2 million number, maybe more. I think that the Assistant City Manager will be very excited. A lot of things just came across my desk in regards to a lot of parks and whatnot. So we are really cooking in regards to a lot of the contracts that are there. And I invite you over to the office to see the mountain of paperwork the DPD has been doing. And I have to say thank you very much to Michael and everyone up in purchasing and the law department. We've really been cooking through this stuff. So it's kind of a number. I would like the base number to be at least $2 million, and I think the more that we can put in there would be something that is going to be very beneficial to housing in the future, whether it be affordable home ownership and things that we really want to do. But we've been really drilling down as to how we can spend this. Is it going to be grant opportunity? Could it be a low interest loan? Could it be something that's paid back into the trust to make this something that is a revolving fund for the future? We're not ready just to pop that number. I'm excited for it, but I'm hoping it's at minimum of $2 million.
I think you outlined well what you're saying, because basically what you're saying is if some contracts don't come in on time, you can switch the funding over to this area and be safe and not give the money back to the federal government. And that's what I take out of this. So, I think that's a brilliant move to go that way, because contracts can get crazy, and when you're signing at this late date, it's a good place for it. So I think this is great stuff, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just want to mention that I did also receive communication from the Lowell plan, and I also reached out to CFO to talk to the director of the law plan regarding the linkage fee, and she did not know that tonight we just vote on to establish the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So any other comments regarding that, Councilor Mercier, or anyone else? Okay. Yeah, Councilor Getchell has one more question.
I guess through you, Mr. Chairman, to either Mr. Manager or Connor Baldwin, is there anything else in this ordinance that we should highlight before going to the council meeting? We highlighted how one becomes a member. We talked about the funding source. We talked about if you're going to add anything to it, such as the linkage fees, that it would have to come back to ordinance. Is there anything that really stands out in the process that we should learn before we get going or before we put it into place that we can bring back to the council? I haven't had a chance to look at it on that end of what actually is in Connor's looking at, so I just would wonder what their comments would be.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much through you to the council. I would say no at this point. The most important piece is that we get this started. And if there is something hypothetically, I don't want to even mention the word linkage, but if there was something that we missed, we could always come back and ask,
Right.
to put that in. That'd be up to the council. But I think the most important part is starting at this time frame to make sure that it is available where there is money that we could put into it. But if there's I had read through it and I didn't see anything that really jumped out to me. Mr. Ball or Ms. Rose?
Yeah, so thank you. There's nothing so much in the ordinance itself, but since the last meeting, DPD staff have spent some time thinking logistically of like how things are going to work once the trust is created. And so right now, we do have a sort of framework for how this would work based on what other communities are doing. We have a model for an application of funding, what people would actually submit to the trust in order for that group to review, and what that sort of checklist of an application might look like. So, for example, we would, expect to have a market assessment provided to us, to understand where the project that they're proposing kind of fits into the market locally. We'd want to know information about what that developer, what their experience is in developing projects. If we're committing these funds, we want to know people have the capacity to pull these projects off. We want to have an understanding of what their underwriting situation is. Do they have their other funding sources available to them? We want to know what their scope is, what the scope of the construction project will be, what their operating costs and plans are for their building. So we'll have a checklist essentially that we would expect people to supply to the trust in this application. A lot of communities also, and I think our plan is to mirror that, accept applications in a rolling basis because, people don't know when they're going to be able to move a project forward. So I think we anticipate that there will be applications accepted on a rolling basis from developers. And then we would sort of, similar to how our other land use boards operate, that information would be collected, distributed to the members for their review and comment. And then applicants would have an opportunity to come in and make their presentation. And then the trust could either, choose to make a decision or choose to ask for additional information. So we are in the early stages of literally like creating what the actual application will look like, what the required documentation from the recipients would look like, and then also discussing the CPC will ultimately actually need to take a vote to send their 10% or whatever percentage the group, it has to be a minimum of 10%, to the Affordable Housing Trust. And essentially that would mean that the CPC is no longer reviewing the housing applications for Community Preservation Act funds. So those applicants would essentially be sent entirely to the trust and would follow the trust's housing application process.
So,
Councilor Kitchie has one more question, please.
So after hearing you, it's kind of like the CPC. You're setting up something similar to that, but yours is going to be a different time frame. You're going to be rolling rather than a set date. And that's really what I was looking for, is just more of an understanding on how it would function. So it's basically an offset of that. It's like an extension of the CPC, and you'll be able to hold it in here and follow those. I think that's excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Baldwin, want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the question because it allows us to sort of dig into the weeds a little bit. There's sort of two provisions of the ordinance that come to mind. One I mentioned briefly being the transfer of real property, and so we wrote into the ordinance, and this was written in a way that's permissive. It's not required, but so that it says that the council may transfer tax title property or properties that have been taken by foreclosure from the city into the trust, and then the trust can dispose of those, and the funding, the proceeds from the sale would become proceeds of the trust. Right. So that is one. We've talked a lot with this city council and with some of the subcommittees about our portfolio of tax title. And that, has a real bearing on neighborhood character, and, a dilapidated property that may be in tax title can really bring down a neighborhood. So this may be one avenue to help with that, but also to provide a sustainable funding source for the trust, number one. And then number two, much like, and this is sort of a new experience for the city as the Community Preservation Act is still somewhat new to Lowell, the trust will be able to borrow money and pay back the debt service for the principal using the balance of the trust. It can also sort of conversely make loans, and this is something that the manager mentioned, but it can make loans, and then any interest, if it's a low interest loan for development, those proceeds would become sort of program income of sort. That could later be lended or granted or used for furthering the purpose of the Affordable Housing Trust. But there are a lot of, this opens up a lot of possibilities as it relates to affordable housing and the development of affordable housing in Lowell. And the administration is very excited about the possibilities that it brings. And, I want to thank the Housing Subcommittee and the City Council for really your leadership in bringing us to this point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baldwin. It is a great news. Before we have the trust, Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the disposition of foreclosed property or the property that taken by tax title was under the DPD. Isn't that correct? And the funding coming from that disposition of those property will go to a special account at the city.
So previously it was a general fund receipt. So by transferring the property into the trust, the proceeds would then become part of the trust in the future.
Right. Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Manager?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, through to the council. And once again, just to reiterate, I don't think that, 2025 we'll be loaning money out. This is something that I think is vitally important that we grow this.
Right.
And then when we're talking to some of our partners throughout the city that just might need, a little bit of a loan, something that is going through the process that we're going to get back to kind of continue, once again, that revolving fund account. And there's a lot of opportunities that we're looking at in the future that currently right now through our CDBG monies, we fund over the Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership. I was at the food bank for a minute. Sorry about that. But to hopefully, fund other opportunities where it's straight grant money or straight operating money. So this is something that is a long-term, I believe it's a long-term fix, and it's something that's going to take a little while, but with us trying to get to work with the CPA, exploring different funding options, I think in years to come we will see something that is going to be extremely beneficial to the city of Lowell. And I have to say thank you to this subcommittee as well as the council. This has been something that this particular council and this subcommittee has been pushing for some time, and I think we're going to see the fruits of this
Yeah.
in years to come, not
Yes.
decades, but in
Right.
years to come, when we really can continue to appropriately fund this. So thank you for your leadership on this.
I want to thank you, Mr. Manager, and also Mr. Baldwin. I think you both leadership, it helps a lot, and then it's evident, and this council particularly pushing more affordable housing development that are needed to reduce the homelessness in our city. So we all work together, and I'm excited that we will have an opportunity to invest some of the ARPA funding into this as a seed money, in addition to the CPA fund, and down the road like that. We have the
Chair.
second item on the agenda that is.
Council Yam?
Yes, sir.
Council Robinson's on Zoom. He wishes to be addressed to council.
Okay. I was going to touch upon what you're going to say, Mr. Councilor Robinson, is that part 2 of the Housing Subcommittee is the package that we received, the low forward homes and housing. I would just have the DPD director and the staff to kind of give an overview, but I would table that at the next Housing Subcommittee in detail, since this is not urgently needed to vote on by the council tonight, is the Affordable Housing Subcommittee Trust. So I would allow you to make some comment, Councilor Robinson. Go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. So with the establishment of this, would some of the conversations we've had early on surrounding incentivizing additional units or redevelopment of space that's unoccupied currently via elevators and stuff like that, would that kind of apply with any of this?
Mr. Baldwin, do you have any comments on that?
It's very difficult to say at this point a lot of these decisions will be in the hands of the trustees.
Yes.
I'm not sure that I can think of examples of other communities that have used it in that way, but we know that Lowell is always very innovative. So if it's something that works and it will help bring about additional development, I'm not sure I can say that it's not possible. But I haven't seen it. I guess I'll leave it there.
Because I was referring to all the properties we have in the downtown specifically that the upper floors, big hindrance is ADA compliance and accessibility. So I don't know how many potential units that could be developed in existing space with some kind of vehicle to allow or at least incentivize the property owners to really look at a project like that.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we move on, I'd like to recognize Councillor Belanger and Councillor Scott, who are in the chamber. Any of you have any comments or questions? Here none. May I turn this? I'd like to turn this to the DPD Director Giovanni. To make a comment or maybe summarize of the housing production plan that you gave it to us. We did not have a chance to really digest on that, but I will then schedule this at the next housing subcommittee meeting to go in detail. But at least we want to have you brief us on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The city has been working over the last year with the NIMCOG. They helped us pull together a housing production plan. A housing production plan is a plan that is created at the state level. There are specific expectations of what would be in a housing production plan. As the city was starting the Lowell Forward Master Planning process, we recognized that housing was going to be an important component of that. And since we were doing the work to get that community outreach and input, we thought it made a lot of sense to take the extra step and actually formally create a housing production plan. So the plan itself is essentially acting as the housing component of the Lowell Forward Master Plan. But there are very specific state mandates and expectations that have to go into a housing production plan, which is why it was very important for us in the planning department to work with our colleagues at NIMCOG. Their capacity for the data collection and analysis played a pretty critical part in the creation of the plan, and so without their support, it would have been difficult for us to pull this plan together in-house. Essentially, the housing production plan does create a number of very specific goals for Lowell to create housing. Planning for equitable and accessible growth, planning for all housing types, essentially, improving the existing quality of housing that exists in the city, reducing housing insecurity and eliminating homelessness. Again, goes back to creating all housing types at all income levels of affordability, provide housing options for our very low and low income neighbors, expanding opportunities for affordable home ownership, and ensuring fair housing policies and practices. So those are the 7 sort of main goals of the plan itself. You can go on. There was a lot of sort of data analysis that was a part of the creation of this plan, and a piece of that was not just looking at what Lowell has now, but looking at trends and what we're projecting will be the case in the future. And so, needing a certain number of new units, needing a certain number of affordable units, specifically trying to understand the percentage of folks in the community that are cost burdened. Mr. Baldwin mentioned earlier that we have almost 8,000 people in the community that are spending, 50% of their income on their housing, which is untenable over the course of in the long term for families, and so trying to reduce that cost burden. So ultimately, the DPD and our partners at NEMCOG would be very happy to present the full plan to the subcommittee. We are looking, the planning board has voted to approve the plan. We do need a council vote to approve the plan in order to then submit it to the state for their approval. That being said, similar to the Lowell Forward Master Plan, we're sort of doing the work already. A component of, housing production is something like helping to create an affordable housing trust fund. And so the work is ongoing, although the presentation hasn't been made yet. So the group would be happy to come to a future presentation and talk in more detail, certainly.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate, and I think you are right, and I agree that, while we're talking about affordable housing trust, establish that, might as well talk about the housing production plan to go along hand in hand. It's almost like a railroad track. However, the time, we don't have enough to really get into detail, so I'd like to dedicate by itself, so the next housing subcommittee meeting just to talk about this, and I would welcome the presentation from DPD and then NEMCOG on this matter. One last note that I'd like to make is my own personal, that I would like to see more of home ownership opportunity, because when people own a piece of American dream, they take into their hearts as far as get involved in the city, and then hopefully increase the voting participation and any other projects that that in the city. Because once you own a home, you now take ownership of what's going on in the city. So my hope, particularly in my district, in the Acre and District 7, where are a lot of renters, and I'm hoping that similar to the Acre Crossing, that allow home ownership, which is really a tremendous building generational wealth, is really critical. And I want to thank you for your time making this presentation, and thank you, Mr. Manager, Mr. Baldwin, and your team, and thank you, Councilor Mercier, Council Scott and Belanger for sitting in and input. I'm hoping that the entire City Council will vote to establish this. So the plan that you want us to look at in the future are not time sensitive as the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right?
Yes, for sure. We're interested in getting the trust voted on as soon as possible. The housing production plan can take a backseat to that.
So that will be the step number 2. We establish the Affordable Housing Trust Fund first, and then we would then vote on the housing production plan. Again, thank you. And wonderful. Thank you so much. Mr. Clerk, motion to adjourn. Councillor,
Second.
in favor? Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.